All right, welcome back. Today, we're going to tackle something that I think every PHP developer goes through, moving away from those massive single-file scripts and into building applications that are actually solid, structured, and, professional. Let's totally transform how you think about your code.
So, does this sound familiar? You've got this big project, it's all one procedurant mess, and you need to change one tiny thing. You go to pull out a single piece of code, and boom, the whole application just comes crashing down. It's fragile, it's unpredictable, and honestly, it's a nightmare to maintain. We've all been there.
Well, the good news is there is a much, much better way to build. We can leave that shaky Jenga tower behind and build something that's more like a skyscraper, strong, stable, and built to last. And the foundation for all of this is a concept called Object-Oriented Programming, or OOP. It's all about creating code that's stable, scalable, and reusable.
So where do we even begin? Well, we start with the absolute heart of OOP, classes and objects. The best way to think about this is like a car factory. Before you can build a single car, you need a detailed blueprint, right? A plan that defines exactly what a car is. In our world, that blueprint is the class.
So a class is just that design document. It says, okay, any car we build will have a brand, it'll have a color, and it'll have the ability to drive and to brake. An object, on the other hand, is the real deal. It's the actual Ford, painted blue, that's rolling off the assembly line. It's a specific, tangible thing created from that class blueprint.
And this slide really breaks that blueprint down into its two main parts. On the left, we've got properties. These are just variables that hold the data about our object, like its $brand or its $color. On the right, we've got methods. These are the actions the object can actually perform, basically functions that belong to the class, like drive car or get car info. Simple as that.
But how do we get from just a blueprint to a car that's actually running? For that, we use a special magic method called a constructor. When you create a new object, this __ construct method runs automatically. Think of it like turning the key in the ignition for the very first time. It's what sets all the initial values, assigning Ford and blue to the new car's properties.
Okay, so now we have our car object. It exists, but we can't just have anybody walking up, popping the hood, and messing with the engine, right? That would be chaos. And that's where our next big principle comes in, encapsulation. This is all about putting some guardrails up to protect our object's data.
And this quote just nails it. By bundling the data and the methods that operate on that data together, and then restricting direct access, we protect the object's internal state. This stops some other random part of your code from, say, changing the car's color without permission. It keeps the whole system secure and predictable. See, no more collapsing Jenga towers.
And this is how we do it in practice. Making your properties public, that's the bad practice. It's like leaving your car unlocked with the keys in the ignition. Anybody can come along and change anything they want. The best practice is to make those properties private, and then provide public methods, we call them getters and setters, to control access. A setter for the car's color could make sure, for instance, that you can't set the color to an invalid value. It's like a bouncer for your data.
All right, so we have our secure, well-defined objects, but how do we organize the entire factory floor? For that, we can use a really popular design pattern called Model View Controller, or MVC. Just think of it as the official org chart for our entire application.
What's so brilliant about MVC is it separates all our concerns into 3 distinct jobs. The model handles all the data and the business rules. It's kind of like the engine in the database. The view is what the user actually sees. That's the showroom floor. And the controller? That's the factory manager, taking in requests and coordinating everything between the model and the view. By keeping them separate, you can completely redesign your website, the view, without ever breaking the core business logic in the model. That is how you solve the Jenga problem for good.
So let's trace a request as it moves through this assembly line. First, a user's request comes in. A router, like a traffic cop, sends it to the right controller, our factory manager. The controller then talks to the model to get whatever data it needs, maybe info on a specific car. Once the model hands that data back, the controller passes it off to the view, which then builds the final HTML page the user sees. It's a clean, logical, and predictable flow every single time.
Okay, our factory is organized, but we can make it even more efficient. And this brings us to a concept called dependency injection, or DI. You can think of this as having a super smart, just-in-time supply chain for all the parts our different objects need to do their jobs.
I mean, really, think about it. It makes 0 sense, right?
If your user service needs a logger to write down what's happening, you wouldn't want that user service to be responsible for building a whole new logger from scratch every time. It's just not efficient, and it makes those two parts permanently stuck together.
And this slide shows the difference so perfectly. On the left, without DI, our user service is hard-coded to build its own logger. They're tightly coupled. But on the right, with DI, we simply ask for a logger in the constructor. We're essentially saying, hey, whoever is creating me, please just give me a logger to use. This makes our user service way more flexible and totally independent of how that logger gets made.
And the benefits here are just huge. Your code becomes way more modular because components aren't welded together anymore. Testability goes through the roof because you can easily give it a fake logger during your tests. And you get massive reusability. That one logger can be used by dozens of different services, making your whole application way more efficient.
Okay, one final critical piece to this whole puzzle. No matter how perfectly we design our factory, sometimes stuff just goes wrong. A machine breaks down, a part is defective. We need a professional way to handle these errors, and that's exactly what exceptions are for.
Now, here's a really important distinction. Not all errors are created equal. A runtime exception is for things you kind of expect might go wrong, like a user typing in a bad password. You should catch these and handle them gracefully, maybe show a nice error message. But a logic exception? Oh, that is totally different. That means there's a serious flaw in your blueprint, a bug in your own code. You don't handle these, you fix them. It's a giant red flag telling you the program's logic is broken and a developer needs to step in.
So let's bring it all home. When you master these 5 principles, you stop just writing lines of code and you start architecting applications. You're building systems that are modular, secure, organized, efficient, and robust. This, right here, is the path from just being a coder to becoming a true software architect.
So there you have it. You now have the foundational blueprints for creating software that's not just functional, but also elegant and, most importantly, maintainable. The only question left is, now that you've got the blueprints, what are you going to build? Thanks for joining me.